Want to know what it's like being a guy? Wait 40 seconds, now there's one less to ask. Get it? Because one of them killed themselves? You get it. You understand. And then in the comments section down here, the man or bear trend ruined me because I felt like every woman looked at me like a man or bear made me feel evil as if I did things which I didn't. Man or bear, so I'm less desirable than an animal. Mama didn't raise no quitter, but she also didn't raise a winner. I don't know who she raised. I don't recognize myself most days. Sorry for being a man. Hardly find anything to live for anymore. I just want to hug. Man or bear made me feel like I shouldn't exist. You guys want a hot take? As Mr. The left needs to pay more attention to men's mental health, those guys in the comment section. If you're the kind of guy who feels insecure and self-hating because women are pointing out that men keep doing this shit, that's on you. Get the fuck over yourself. Genuinely. If someone in chat did this earlier too, if the point of what a woman said, or what anyone says, is men are often like this, and you're not like that, then what the fuck is the issue? What's with the insecurity? Jesus. Like, you're making it about you. You're doing the problem right there. You're literally doing the problem. You know, like a woman is like, hey man, women, like, you know, we're often mistreated by men. And a guy's like, but don't you know how that makes me feel? It's not important right now. The shot is not being taken at you. It's okay, Troop. You can take a break. Come back more secure. The bear thing was just about culture. It wasn't a descriptive statement about how men are. Men are kind of like, let's be fair here, okay? And I'm not doing this like, we're not doing like any white knight, oh, woe is me, you know, I'm one of the good men, whatever. We're not coming at it from that angle, okay? You can come at it from a cold, hard, factual angle. Men do be like that. And it just, I personally cannot fathom. As a guy who has always had to conduct himself with an understanding that my size and appearance might put some people, like, make them feel uneasy because I'm like a big guy and, you know, and I'm a little overbearing in person. So I understand that, you know, maybe some people are more sensitive to that, some chicks, whatever, right? Like, as somebody who's always had to consider that, I cannot imagine getting insecure at the the man v bear thing. I can't. I just can't. Like, why? It's not about you. I mean, if it is about you, then you shouldn't be insecure. You should feel confronted by the criticism. In this case, I don't even blame the left. These people need psychologists. And I'm not going to lie, it's not just an insecurity thing. They're doing the male centering thing. Like, imagine taking a talking point that is about how women are often victimized by men and going, I, a man, feel like hurt by this. You're kind of proving the point a little bit. Protagonist syndrome. Well, men have been known to do that. The part I can't get over is how many men are just absolute complete dogshit humans. Have you guys been following that story in France of that one woman who had like 100 men her because the husband arranged it? And the guy was making forum posts where he was like, hey, my drugged wife. And thousands of people saw it and nobody reported it, and like 100 guys did it, and the woman waived her right to a private trial just so those guys could be like named and shamed. Have you not? You're all acting like you haven't heard about this? It's been a whole thing. Sorry I don't follow all the news. Yeah, you're behind on the meta. Likely one of the worst sexual criminals in the past 20 years. Oh, click the link. Past 20 years. Dominique Pellico has admitted to abusing his wife without her knowledge between 2011 and 2020, drugging her with sleeping pills, then recruiting dozens of strangers in her own home. That's been discourse. What the hell, Vosh? Would you hear this? It's been international news. It's a huge deal. She waived her right to a private trial. The sorry for being a man comment sent me. Yeah, the guy is seeing like the response to this trial online. Sorry for being a man. Epstein's greatest student, his greatest apprentice. Thinking about the 6'7" baseball player man in my thesis class who wanted to conduct private one-on-one interviews with female domestic abuse survivors for his research. When some femme classmates pointed out he might terrify them and to bring someone along with him, he was floored and baffled, Wash. He also said, quote, abuse is for girls and boys in his speech. So, Jesus Christ. Do you think that was his plan? It's like a remarkable lack of awareness for a lot of guys. And then when you try to make them aware, they get really offended by it, like you're personally attacking them. I think that acting attacked when this comes up is like warrants it being an attack, if that makes sense, right? He had it on his PowerPoint. Well, good on him for red flagging himself, I guess. Jesus. It's kind of the nature of every social power dynamic for the person in a position of greater power to self-victimize. White people constantly self-victimizing. Men constantly self-victimizing. The wealthy constantly the more social power you have, the more likely you are to do this, like, oh, I'm not one of the bad ones, what do you mean by that, that kind of thing, you know. Very rarely do the people in the position of social power manifest that power in a self-assured way. We like to imagine, in a narrative sense, we like to imagine that powerful people know they're powerful and they act with the kind of like smarmy awareness of the power they hold over others. But in reality, they usually like are either dishonest enough to pretend they don't have that power or genuinely pathetically think they don't have it. You know what I mean? And they act like they're actually the victim. Yeah, the power makes them blind. I mean, that is the power of privilege, but in this case, it often makes them like babies. Yeah, goo goo gaga, mother. They're terrified of losing their power. Well, in a lot of cases, they genuinely don't even know about it. Like, many men and many white people don't think of their relative social power or privilege, right? They just kind of like accept the dynamic. A lot of guys think women have the relative social power, right? Because they're like, oh, well, women gatekeep sex, which to an extent they do. And like, oh, women get, you know, women get like if you hit a guy in a bar, it's a fight, but if you hit a girl in a bar, it's abuse. Like that kind of thing, you know, like women have a kind of, but the protections that women get are because we treat women like children, you know, in terms of like meaningful social power. You know, it's like what does the dynamic between men and women look like? People might take women a little bit more seriously when they cry foul, but all the CEOs in the business you work in are men, right? Like, women might be able to cry foul a little more effectively, but the HR managers, the CEOs, the stockholder, all of that, it's like men all up there. You know what I mean? So it's like sometimes it is invisible, but you have to feel that. And I don't blame chicks for being a little bit on edge when you're with like a guy who's just kind of around or leering. And leering is a relative description, right? You might just be looking at a chick on a train because you think she's got a cool handbag or something, or maybe she kind of looks like someone you recognize but not really, and you're sort of like, hey, is it that person from high school? And she notices and she's leering, also booba. Well, see, now you're I was being charitable by assigning non-sexual explanations for staring at a woman on the bus, but now you've kind of put forward one that would legitimize her feeling a little leered at. If you're staring at a woman because their boobs fucking suck. I'm gonna be honest with you, by the way. If some lady's got giant honkers, I think it's only human to like look at her. You can look at people in public, but there's a difference between looking, staring, and leering, right? We're all humans. We can acknowledge that, right? You have to be, but for a lot of people, you can't even trust them with that knowledge. It's like when you tell guys, you know, like, guys, stop approaching women in public, you're making them uncomfortable. But the kind of guy who does that won't take your advice because they don't think they're a problem. And the kind of guy who will take your advice is already self-conscious enough that they probably weren't the problem to begin with. So when you give advice like that, you're further dissuading the insecure and you're doing nothing to the brash. And there's nothing you can really do to cross that gap because you can't say, okay, only non-confident people take this advice. Only confident people take this advice, because obviously no one's going to self-sort themselves like effectively there. Approaching women in public is fine if you're careful. It's well, a lot of it is just contextual social stuff, but you can't really do that unless you're aware of the whole dynamic. And a lot of like, I don't think these guys are aware of the whole dynamic. Some of the people in this Insta, or what is this, TikTok, in the TikTok thing just seem depressed. And if a guy's depressed, you should take that seriously. I'm not saying that's not worth taking seriously, but like, man or bear made me feel like I shouldn't exist. Really? First of all, you're in TikTok comments. You're probably 15. What are you talking about? Boy or cub to the girls your age, you know? What, like, I don't, why does it make you feel like you shouldn't exist? I don't get that. Did the video even mention the bear thing? I don't know. I don't really care, to be honest. It probably does, because so many guys here are mentioning it. Man or bear, so I'm less desirable than an animal? Really? You're gonna do that? The, like, pity bait off of the topic? Come on. That's pretty sad. Like, that's on you. That's the most man answer I've ever seen. Yeah. The man or bear trend ruined me because I felt like every woman looked at me like I was a rapist. I'm going to be honest with you, man. If that's how you felt about it, maybe they do. I don't know. I feel like most women, I shouldn't say most. I should say like a lot of women when they're out are more wary of men than you appreciate. and not in a like, oh, I bet that guy's a rapist kind of thing, but more in the feeling of like, if that guy swung his arm at me, I couldn't really do anything about it. I think a lot of guys don't really I think a lot of guys don't really understand this, which is weird because I bet that you've experienced that yourself when you were around a guy who was more physically intimidating than you are, right? Like, have you never been at a bar and there was a really big guy there and he just looked kind of aggro? And you, in your head, you're thinking, I don't think he's gonna attack me. But if he did swing at me, I would like definitely just get knocked flat. Like that would like that's definitely not a winnable confrontation, especially if he opened on it, you know? Because I think for most guys, with most other men, they have this delusional belief that like, oh, I could handle it myself. Like I could take care of them, even if they don't fight or they're not athletic or anything, you know. But every once in a while you meet a guy who just looks really aggro and really big, and it's not like you're afraid of him necessarily. You can be right up next to him or talk to him or whatever. Like you're not instantly like cowering in fear, but you might think like, if that guy starts trouble, I'm in trouble. Does that make sense? I think that maybe a lot of chicks think that way about a lot of guys, and I think it's just good to be aware of that, because living with that is, you know, I mean, that's got to be a little tiring. Bosh, I'm 6'3", 275. I'm pretty secure. South Texas Titan. I was 6'2", 290, 3 years ago. There's always a bigger guy, but you're doing the thing right now, though. You're doing the thing where it's like, oh no, I could avoid, I could avoid having to understand this dynamic because I'm a big guy. You know what I mean? But then you understand my point, right? You've taken this explanation as an excuse to brag about your size. I notice a lot of the guys in chat are taking the opportunity to talk about their size, which is interesting, you know, maybe perhaps even complementary to my point, where I'm trying to talk about like empathizing with the worldview of having to be a little bit wary of people, you know. I'm just saying, I mean, it's not like I'm a tiny guy or anything. I had a bad experience before I transitioned to stop dating guys who are taller, bigger than me for a while. Because I'm really sorry, Tempest. Yeah, it's just like a fact of, well, I shouldn't say it's a fact. Well, it is a fact of life that some people are going to be larger than you, but it is a fact of life, I think, to feel like that like wariness. I think that's completely fair. I don't think that's like emasculating in any way, right? Like, can you imagine it's like the Middle Ages or something, and you're at a tavern in your village, and a guy is in there with a sword, and no one has a sword in your village. Do you have any idea how expensive swords are? You have like a kitchen knife that you keep with you, like a little shitty, like a paring knife or like a skinning knife or something, you know, some little thing. And there's a guy with a sword, and you're like, okay, if that guy draws, like we're just all and that it's not like an emasculation thing. It's just an acknowledgement that swords are sharp. Nah, I'd win. I'd simply lock in. You all get what I'm talking about, right? When you see women talking about this, as a guy, please resist the urge to make it about your moral well-being. Okay, I'll put it this way. If you have a friend who's a girl, I know I'm assuming a lot right off the bat here, but let's just imagine you've gotten that far, and she's telling you a story with themes similar to this one, and she's telling you like maybe an ex-boyfriend hit her or something, you know, something like that, or maybe she felt threatened. The last thing that you should do as a guy is to say, oh, you don't think all guys are like that, right? I would never do that. You don't really think all guys are like that. Because if you act like that, you are locking yourself in a very negative part of her mind for good reason. Well, that would be insane. Yeah, but I think a lot of guys actually I genuinely think they do that. I mean, they do it a lot online, but that's a really crazy move. I think that if you're chill with this information, like, it shouldn't bother you. Well, it should bother you in the sense that people are getting hurt out there, but it shouldn't bother you personally, like, with regards to your self-esteem, because you're just like, well, I'm not that guy. And if you are that guy, then maybe you deserve to feel a little bit bad about it. I don't know. You shouldn't be that guy. It's like, you could always change, I guess. You know, I do think that people can change. You ever wonder why people, it seems like sometimes people do an assault or a murder, and they get arrested, they go to prison, they spend some time in prison, they get out, and they're a different person. But we don't really feel that way about rapists. If you're talking to some like 70-year-old guy, and he's like, yeah, I did 20 years for murder back in like 83 or something. You can talk about that, but with rapists, you don't really hear about that. You don't, oh, you raped someone in 83. Well, what happened? That doesn't really. And there are a lot of reasons for that. The idea being that it is possible to kill a person in what is perceived to be a justifiable circumstance, right? Like self-defense, or maybe the court disagrees with you. There are a lot of, like, I guess I would call them romantic narratives about murder. Like maybe you killed a guy who raped your daughter, and like that's still murder, but I think that people would look at that and go, okay, there's something here. This wasn't just like a cold-blooded nothing murder, right? Or like a crime of passion, like you freak out. And I don't think those things necessarily apply to rape, because the idea of a person in like a very like incredibly heated moment flipping out and killing somebody but then coming to regret it, I don't think you can do that with, right? Like, oh yeah, I freaked out and raped her. What? I'm not seeing the narrative pretext. It's not selling with me. Clip it, don't clip it. You also can't rape in self-defense. No. Unless you're in anime and you fall on her. Yeah, that's why, I mean, they're trying to launder it in anime. Also, the recidivism rate with murder is like below 1% with very different story. No. I agree with that. And I think that's because when it comes to stuff like rape, which is gendered violence, in a lot of cases, of course, men kill men. I'm not denying that. But obviously, a lot of sexual violence is spent on women. Or with things like racism, these aren't just, or like, let's say a hate crime that is racially informed. They're not just crimes. They're crimes motivated by hate or bias or privilege or social power outside just the dynamic of one person killing another person. Does that make any sense? And I think that's one of the reasons why when it comes to murder, it's like you got a pretty flat attitude towards it. Like, okay, why did it happen? When did it happen? What have you turned into since then? With, I think a lot of guys, respectfully to men, I think a lot of guys never even think they did it, Like, I bet you a ton of the guys who went over and the drugged wife of the husband who's currently facing 50 trillion years in prison, in their head, they're thinking, oh, she was asleep, or like, oh, this was a thing between her and her husband, and a husband can't rape a wife, so my participation in it fell within the purview of a husband's legitimate right to the body of the wife, or whatever. Like, they have narratives. You know what I mean? Because murder is kind of objective. I mean, if a person dies, they die. That's kind of like, it's, you kind of got that one on paper, but with guys often, like, not just guys, but you get what I'm talking about. I also don't buy that guys don't understand basic consent. I know the temptation is to assign malice, but in a lot of cases, unfortunately, they genuinely don't. That doesn't mean that them breaking consent of others is wrong. It just means that they're oftentimes doing it with, I don't know, willful negligence rather than malicious disregard, which, I mean, we're kind of splitting hairs on evil here, right? We're still talking about murder is actually good. Got it. Thanks, Fosh. Okay, yeah, okay. Got the right one there. Bait. It's a joke. It's a joke. I also feel like when people say, I don't like rapists, they're partially saying it for the sake of moral grandstanding. Well, of course that's moral grandstanding. The statement, I don't like rapists, is pretty much self-evident. Like, why say that if you're not morally grandstanding? It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, we get it. Obviously. No shit. But whatever the case may be, I guess the point that I'm trying to get at here is just, I don't know, try to be empathetic. Woman or tiger videos where they were whining about women being gold diggers and shit. First of all, comparing women being gold diggers to men raping you. And second, who the deals with gold digger in this economy? Who's getting gold digged? Who's having this? Who's engaging in these talking points? Middle schoolers? Who has gold? You don't have gold. Who has gold? Whose gold is getting dug? I'm not gonna lie. I'm not painting with the broadest brush here, only with like a very broad brush, but I think if you're a guy and you get gold dug, you kind of deserve it. Every single time I've ever seen that dynamic play out, the guy deserved it because he was only looking for a chick with like a hard body and didn't give a fuck about her feelings and didn't care to learn anything about her. And it's like, what do you expect? She provides the tits, you provide the money. You were engaging in a transactional relationship from the get-go. Like, I know it happens, but in my life, I have never seen an instance of a guy who looked like and was acting like he was interested in a genuine mutual romantic relationship with mutual respect and blah, blah, blah. And then the woman was just like, hee, this is all a plan to get the money. I've never heard of that. I've heard of young women marrying 85-year-old men and getting their money when they die. That's not gold digging, okay? That's giving the ancient guy pussy on his way out. That's not the same thing, okay? And I've heard of like guys wanting trophy wives who just look really good but don't ask anything of them. And then it's like, oh, she wants the money? Wow, no way. What else were you offering them? Sometimes gold diggers will prey on emotionally or financially vulnerable guys. Financially vulnerable? I Yes, but what I don't know what that means necessarily. Emotionally vulnerable, like a girl will be like, "Hello, I'm much more attractive than you. My sexual marketplace value is 4 points greater than yours. I love how big your bank account is. Wouldn't you like me to suck your dick?" You don't need a prenup, do you, honey? I don't know. At some point, I feel like you're kind of falling for the bit. I guess like that's scamming. I mean, it's bad. I don't want people to be scammed. I'm just saying that oftentimes guys who complain about gold diggers don't really like women anyway. I mean, they like women sexually, but they don't like women. Oftentimes guys will try to buy their love and get mad when it doesn't work. Yeah, if you try to buy love and then the chick only loves your money, what the else were you? That's what you were doing. Yeah, literally, Verm. It's like Republicans with a net household income of $22,000 complaining about the capital gains tax, unrealized capital gains tax that only hits people with 100 million or more. It's like, okay, yeah, that must be really hard for you. Guys go out of their way to want a trad wife, then complain that she's using his money and doesn't work. Yeah, what do you mean by trad wife? You want a trad wife? Okay, mother. Go out there and work and then make her, like, have her handle the house finances. Do you think it's wrong to ask a girl for a prenup? I think in some cases it can be okay, but if you're going to marry someone, you should probably trust them enough. What? It's a contract you sign before marriage that means that she doesn't get half your shit if you split. If you're marrying someone, like, you should trust each other. I can understand it if there might be some circumstances where it's okay, but I think like you should trust somebody you marry, right? Is this not victim blaming? No, it's not. I appreciate you asking to clarify. What if I don't trust anyone? Then don't get married, dumbass. Prenups only work for pre-marriage assets. Yeah, if you're marrying into if you're like a rich prince and you're marrying a peasant girl, maybe you can get a prenup. But yeah, if you marry someone and then you get rich with them, I mean, yeah, I think it's okay for them to have half of the stuff. Damn, we still on that? Why do people always ask that? When you, 2D Siggy, you and everyone else here knows we can fully well do a topic for multiple hours. If you trust them, why not get a prenup? You mean, wait, do you mean if you don't trust them, why not get a prenup? Or if you do trust them, why get a prenup? I don't understand. Prenups only protect things from before the marriage. That's why they're called prenups, yes. That's what we're talking about. If you trust them, what's the risk of a prenup? I don't understand. The prenuptial isn't a risk. The lack of a prenuptial is the risk. I don't understand the question. It has nothing to do with trust. There are valid reasons to divorce even if trust was never broken. Oh, okay. But if that's the case, then if you trust them, then they wouldn't get all your stuff because they wouldn't try to get it from the court. I think they mean you should always get a prenup. Once you're married, you know that you should have a shared bank account, right? Like, when you're married, you're married. If you want to be boyfriend and girlfriend, be boyfriend and girlfriend. If you're married, you're married. You really want to run like a household together and manage a family together, and you're like needling over separate assets, like, oh, they make 50K a year, you make 65K a year. We have to keep that separate because that 15K extra per year that I get, I want to dedicate that portion to like my personal. What are you talking about? It's the household income. Separate finances is incredibly common. Yeah, so is divorce. Bro, chat is all virgins. Why are you having? I know, you're right. You're right. I know. It's okay. It's fine. It's all right. It's okay. Chat regurgitating shit they read on Reddit relationship advice forums. Yeah, like, am I the asshole stuff. My fiance, who makes $38,000 a year, he says that he wants to get a prenup even though he has negative assets, and he says he trusts me. I told him that he's broke and should get over himself. Am I the asshole?